Hello and welcome to episode 207 of The Dive Down, a Magic the Gathering podcast focused on the latest decks, trends, and Phyrexians for the casual spike. My name is Shane here in Denver, Colorado, and with me on the line from Chicago, Illinois, it's the one and only Godfather, Dave Harbarger.
Hey,
Dave. Dave, I like that flannel.
You like this flannel? I like your floral. It's a floral and a flannel.
Yeah, I'm into bonobos lately. Bonobos, get at us. They have many sizes.
That would be huge. We're people who need special sizes for things. Is it bonobos or bonobos?
Oh, that's actually a really good question. I always said bonobos.
I was talking to Jane Goodall the other day, and she told me it was bonobo. She might have been messing with me, though.
Jane Goodall, get at us. Sponsor our podcast. So this is going to be a fun week. So this is our first spoiler episode without Stan in a long time.
We've done it before.
Yeah, you're right. But I feel like we've had a guest, or he's been on one of the two, and I don't think he's going to be on either of the spoiler episodes for the set. And I feel like we're going to lack that certain Stan sensibility.
You mean to pick a card that you absolutely think won't be good enough and then argue with you about it? Is that the sensibility?
That's it. I mean,
while I sit back and watch you guys do that?
For whatever reason, I just always think back to Dovin Bond. And that was the first one I remember just being like, no, this is not a playable card.
And that's 200 episodes ago.
I mean, you never forget your first time talking about spoiler cards. On this week's show, we're going to be talking about a whole mess of spoiler cards. Lots of Phyrexian fun this week.
I mean, new Phyrexia certainly looks like a mess. If there's one way to describe it. I don't know what we're doing anymore. Magic lore, what are we doing anymore? It's a mess.
Dave, I wasn't around for old Phyrexian stuff.
Sure.
What's the conceit of this?
What do you mean? They're like the ultimate original big bad guys in Magic.
More than the Emrakulians?
Yeah. Phyrexians go back to antiquities. They were
okay.
They're way back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess you can tell me about...
I can't do this show anymore. What are you talking about?
There's a lot of callbacks in this set, so I'm looking forward to you telling me about what kind of random Phyrexian effects these are.
Yeah, I mean, these are callbacks specifically to the Mirrodin and Scars of Mirrodin era. So remember, Mirrodin is the first set of Modern, right? It's the first set that's in Modern.
Darksteel is, right?
No, Mirrodin's the first set. Darksteel is a sequel to Mirrodin.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, and then later on, during the era when I was beginning to play Magic again, that's, I started in the very end of a Alara block, played Zendikar block, and then I believe that Mirrodin was the one right after that, though I could be wrong. So Scars of Mirrodin was the one after that. And that's where we ended up with new Phyrexia, which is the source of Phyrexian mana and many other things that people complain about. And now we're back here. But can I just say, these Cenobites are crazy. Am I right? What is up with it?
They're making me thirsty.
These Cenobites are making me thirsty. Yeah, exactly.
Well, Dave, we'll have a lot of Cenobites to talk about.
Everything has 6 arms and blades for fingertips, and then eyeballs on stalks. And what is this?
I mean, I keep looking at these blade arms, and I'm like, what am I doing wrong with my life that I don't have these?
Exactly.
Before we get into this, though, Dave, let's do some brief housekeeping. We have one new patron, one new citizen of the Dive Down Nation. It's Omar B. Omar, thank you for signing up via the Patreon. No new tiers, no new reviews. I did notice, though, that we're up to 318 starry reviews on Spotify. That's quite a few. Thanks for all you getting in that Spotify app and throwing some stars our way. We appreciate it. If you want to be like Omar, if you want to join the Patreon, you can go over to patreon.com/thedivedown. It's the best way to support us, keep us going, let us know that you like what you're doing. It's funny, I think Omar joined today, and immediately, I like when new people join and spark conversation, where they're like, I want to talk about decks, I want to talk about learning how to be better at Magic, and us aside. We do have quite a few people in the Dive Down Nation who are actually good at Magic and actually do grind and learn. And I like when we have conversation about, becoming better at Magic.
Yeah. I have to say, you ever read The Great Gatsby, Shane?
When did we read that in high school? 10th grade?
I don't know, 10th grade. I sometimes in the Discord, at this point in my Magic career, I feel a little bit like Gatsby, who's sort of like hosts the party, but isn't in the party. You're sort of like, let me introduce you to these people because I'm not good at Magic, but these people that I know are. And, but I have a podcast, so we're party hosts now. I think that's what it is.
I mean, I like adding more people to the party. Patreon.com/thedivedown. And if you want to support us by wearing some Dive Down merch, head on over to the store, thedivedown.com/store. We've got cool t-shirts and hats and hoodies and fanny packs. If you like playing Magic online, if you want to get better at Magic, it's a very good way to do so. You can use the rental service Manatraders, manatraders.com. Use sign-up code THEDIVEDOWN10 for 10% off your first 2 months of Manatraders service, and that gets us a little kickback there. Of course, our ongoing partnership with Barrister and Mann. We have a new code alert. The Dive Down 2023. The Dive Down 2023. And of course, if you want to buy some paper cards at Nerd Rage Gaming, our friends over at who run the NRG Open Circuit, you can use code DIVE8 just for 8% off your order.
Did it.
So Dave.
Yep.
We're talking about some previews of what is this set even called? One?
All will be one.
All will be one. And the code is one. And so we have a few problems with these previews, right? Like there was a whole bunch of leaks, stuff that was in like, Dominaria United packs or some such
remastered
nonsense.
Packs. By the way, I opened up some Dominaria remastered packs, and don't do that. Buy the singles. I'm going to go with the professor on this one. I love open packs, but this one I was like, what?
So the problem here, though, is that typically we try our best to avoid leaks, right? And we use Scryfall as our source of truth for kind of what's a leak and what's a legitimate spoiler. Mythic spoiler, they kind of will post some leaks a little bit earlier, so I don't always use them. Scryfall is hosting a lot of these cards, whether or not I think they've been officially spoiled. If it's on Scryfall, I think we basically have to consider it spoiled at this point. Apologies if that's not your thing, but you're probably not listening to spoiler episodes if that's not your thing, so just roll with it with us. If anyone out there, had their spoiler, leaked a little bit early, I feel bad for you because it is fun to have fun with your spoiler and get some eyes on your stream or your Twitter or whatever, but it's Wizard's fault, right? It's the printer's fault. Who knows? We're sorry. We tried. We've held off for a long time. Yeah. We are a little bit behind some other podcasts at this point, so we gotta catch up. You know what no one I've heard talk about, though, in their podcasts are the mechanics. And there's some cool mechanics.
We do a good job of that.
Oh, yeah. We got to extend this runtime somehow.
Shane, what's your favorite mechanic from Phyrexia All Will Be One?
Man, I'll tell you in a second.
Okay.
But this first one's not my favorite. It's close, though.
Okay.
So it's toxic. Toxic's a new keyword.
Yeah.
And toxic is anytime a creature with toxic deals combat damage to a player, that player gets a number of poison counters equal to the toxic value of the creature. So if it says toxic 6, they get 6 poison counters. It's not like Infect, where the power of the creature then deals infect damage. And so here's an example: Jawbone Duelist, 1 and a white, double strike, 1/1 with toxic 1. Yeah. So toxic is just dramatically different than the way infect strategies would work in the past. You would buff and protect your infect creatures to deal 10 infect as quickly as possible, effectively halving your opponent's life total, dealing all infect damage. I don't really know how well the toxic cards I've seen are going to work for constructed. Infect all by itself isn't really viable anymore. I mean, I'm sorry, infect mains out there. It's it's going to pop up here and there. That's what the existing infect rules as is. Toxic, I think, seems in constructed potentially just strictly worse right now, unless there are some bonkers toxic numbers somewhere where if you do get some damage and maybe some really cool flyer or some ability to give a creature toxic X or something like that, that's something I can see making toxic potentially viable.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is one asterisk to this in my mind, but I think for the most part, yeah, toxic is definitely slipping under infect, and I wish it was a little bit different, but I don't think the potential's there the same way. I think it's already gotten pretty late for infect, like you said, so we can give up on it. Except for one asterisk. We're going to talk about one card. I think you know what it's going to be that I think has a chance to make infect interesting, at least for modern. Obviously,
I mean, it's a toxic card, but it does infect damage or gives some poison counters. Yeah,
it's called Foreshadowing. But I was just looking through Skyfall at all the cards that have been spoiled with toxic so far, and there's none that have really huge amounts of toxic. There's one called Paladin of Predation that has toxic 6, but it costs 7 mana, and it's a 6/7, and it can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. It's got that mechanic on it. There are a bunch of tokens that are generated here with Toxic. There's like maybe a swarm strategy that's possible. I know that there's one thing that makes, there's a piece of equipment that whenever equipped creature attacks, create a 1/1 colorless Phyrexian Mite, this artifact creature with Toxic. But I don't know. Sorry.
Maybe there's just some wild way to be like, blow up a card and make like 7 toxic tokens and then like go wide strategy like you said, but this seems like a limited mechanic. And another limited mechanic coming up that kind of goes hand in hand with the toxic theme is Corrupted, which is a new ability word. Abilities that make cards do things if an opponent has 3 or more poison counters. So the example here, we have the Seed Core, which is a sphere land. You can tap it to add colorless. You can tap it to add 1 mana of any color, which can only be spent to cast Phyrexian creature spells. And then it has a Corrupted ability. You can tap and give target 1/1 creature +2/+1 until end of turn if they have 3 or more poison counters. So, I mean, the Seed Core is like an interesting option for old school Infect decks. It provides mana for your early creature drops and then buffs them to +2 to finish off the opponent, but then it can't generate spell mana in basically any way. So I don't know about that.
I mean, no, there's one thing that Infect likes, and that's spells, as it turns out.
Yeah, you like a lot of spells.
You like to pump. It's your giant growth deck. Not with Toxic, it's not. That won't work.
No. I mean, there's like static corrupted abilities on things like enchantments that give creatures you control lifelink, or like spells that have corrupted abilities that'll have like additional effects if you have a corrupted opponent. This seems kind of win more when it's working, and then like maybe like a bad floor when it's not. Like, but we'll have to look at the synergies in the set. Like if they don't have infect counters, then your corrupted cards don't do anything. And if they do, then it's like, sweet, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing already. They have infect counters. But
right, thanks.
Yeah, cool.
So I don't buy this one as any constructed mechanic either.
Dave, there's equipment in this set.
Of course.
Which makes sense. Yeah. There's a new triggered ability, however.
Yeah, I mean, keep in mind, this is the set's, the blocks, Scars of Mirrodin block, and I believe New Phyrexia in particular is where Living Weapon was premiered to everybody. And so that idea of an equipment that comes into play with a token attached to it, we have a new twist on that idea in this one with kind of the best, this is like the best mechanic name I've ever seen. I think. This is so silly. Why did they do this? For Mirrodin!
For Mirrodin! And what does that do?
Well, what it says is it's an ETB when equipment comes in with a 2/2 Rebel creature token that immediately equips to it. So it's the same as your Germ, except it has stats, which is kind of weird.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool. Like, it's better than the Germ in some way. Though unfortunately, the equipment that we've seen that features for Mirrodin, that I've seen at least, is not very good.
Not yet, anyway. Yeah, no. We'll see. But I do think we know that Living Weapon is good. Okay. And
yes.
This is not different from Living Weapon. It just all depends on what creatures they pick and what stats they pick, basically, and how costly these things are. So, for example, the one that you have here, this 2 generic and a blue called Blade of Shared Souls. Whenever Blade of Shared Souls becomes attached to a creature, for as long as Blade of Shared Souls remains attached to it, you may have that creature become a copy of another target creature you control. That is a cheap 2/2 clone effect. Right? So it's a clone effect on an equipment.
Yeah.
But like, I don't think we're really doing that.
No, we're not. I mean, we already have clones that can be lands. Do you know what I mean? Like for the same mana cost. So
yeah, but however, if they make one that's like 3 mana for a 4/4, and the equipment gives +2/+2 and has equip 1 or something weird like that, like there's a chance you would maybe consider that in some kind of aggro deck. I mean, there's always a chance that something will have a ton of abilities piled up on top of it. That's entirely possible as well for a reasonable cost. It's there's potential in this mechanic, I think, maybe more so than the other two.
Yeah. We also have oil counters, which are just, specific counters where cards care about, permanence with various oil counters on them. You can use the oil counters in various ways, the usual kind of stuff, or set specific tokens. Proliferate is a returning keyword action.
Well, wait, I want to go back to oil tokens for a minute.
Oh, fine. Okay.
So just really quickly, because the oil counters I have been watching, I don't think we have any cards that we talk about them specifically from spoilers, but it might come up next week. So many of these cards that have oil counters on them are attached to whenever you cast a non-creature spell, add oil counter to target permanent, and then it does something. I think that there's a chance that in a non-creature spell type strategy where you're casting a lot of spells, say, is it with a lot of spells, there is a chance that an oil counter card could get there potentially. We'll just have to see.
I don't disagree.
Yeah.
And then we do have Proliferate, which is a returning keyword action. When anytime you're instructed to proliferate, you just choose any number of players or permanents that already have counters on them, and for each one, and for each kind of counter it has, you add another one. There's a lot of Proliferate cards in this set.
Yeah.
Proliferate's never been something that you build around in Modern, really.
Yeah, I don't think there was ever a moment where Infect used Proliferate to do things. I have seen the occasional permanent that randomly has Proliferate on it that would go with your Planeswalkers or something like that. And in fact, there is an interesting artifact in this set that maybe we'll talk about this week or next week that gives an ability to all of your Planeswalkers that's just 0 : Proliferate. But
I saved that one for next week, so unless you added it.
I did not add it. But Proliferate is a powerful mechanic, but the problem is it's always been overcosted, I think. And so if they happen to do one now where they make it cheap, could be a thing. Just to close out the mechanics, we don't know.
Yeah, who knows?
Who knows? I'm looking for Mirran to be something. We'll see.
This looks like a complex limited set. I'll say that.
I'll tell you, Scars and Mirran block generally was not an easy set to play, especially as like the third set after I came back. So many counters, so many weird things going on with it. It was not an easy set, and everybody thought that Infect was going to be the thing that killed everybody when we got around to Scars in particular, and then later on, Infect got a little less relevant as the block went on, but there was a lot of other stuff going on in that limited environment for sure.
All right, Dave. So to start this off, we have some lands. We have some good lands. We have the Allied Fast lands are finally back. They got an environment in which they felt they could bring back Blackleaf Cliffs, Copperline Gorge, Dark Slick Shores, Rager Verge Thickets, and Seachrome Coast. Our Allied Fast lands are now in Pioneer and reprinted into Modern.
It's about time. I mean, these cards were printed. God, was that like 2010 when Mirran came out, when Mirran Besieged came out? I'm going to have to check real quick.
Well, while you're checking, I think these are big gets for Pioneer. More help for the Allied color pairs who needed the help.
These cards were printed in 2010, 13 years ago. Scars and Mirran was released on October 1st, 2010. We've been waiting for any reprints of these cards since then. And at certain points in time, like Blackleaf Cliffs was like a $50 card at different points in Modern, right?
Like $45, $50. Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah.
Copperline Gorge had its time as like a $20 card when like Dredge was a big thing. All of these cards have had their time in the sun, have been valuable. And I think they'll be valuable again in Pioneer. More help, like I said, for the Allied color pairs that have been lacking a little bit, especially like the aggressive ones when you don't always want to use pain lands. And so we've got Rakdos midrange, Selesnya Angels, Gruul midrange, and like random Gruul aggressive decks, Obzon Greasefang, Racksack. I think all of those decks will pick up some number of these. Yeah.
I think the biggest thing here is that I don't think it necessarily unlocks any new decks right now in Pioneer for sure.
No.
But it's huge for the format going forward to have access to these lands. The ones that are from Kaladesh are played in different quantities in different places, of course, but they can make things easier for a future Gruul deck to exist that's maybe more aggro than the Boats deck is right now, or who knows, anything in the future. It's just nice to have balance in that format finally. By the way, do you know when the Kaladesh Fastlands were printed?
Oh, Kaladesh was like, what, 2016?
Yeah. So it's been 6.5 years since the other ones were printed. So it's been, they do not print these cards frequently.
Yeah, so grab them while you can.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything else to say other than that. Grab them while you can. They will see play in some decks in Pioneer, like Shane said. Who knows? But I don't think it'll change Pioneer, but it will make it more balanced.
Yeah, I'm going to finish up my playsets. Like, I only have like one or two Razorverge Thickets. I only have like one or two Seachrome Coast, I think. So might as well grab them.
Yeah. Yeah, same.
Let's talk about a weird land.
An actual new card.
Yes, actual new card.
Yeah.
The Mycosynth Gardens, I love the Mycosynth Gardens in the spring. It's a sphere land. You tap it to add colorless, 1 and a tap, so you filter land into 1 mana of any color, and then X tap. The Mycosynth Gardens becomes a copy of target non-token artifact you control with mana value X. Okay, so right off the bat, this is cool. This is weird. This is flexible. Just target non-token artifact you control with mana value X.
But we all know that I believe that there is only one that we really care about here. Maybe two.
Probably, I mean, Amulet Titan, right?
Right. That's the one that everybody looks at immediately and goes, wait, what? Wait.
wait a minute. I can have 2 Amulet of Vigors really quickly.
Yes.
So here's like the new turn 2 line that I did not know this, right? I just had to look this up. So turn 1, the Mycosynth Gardens casting Amulet of Vigor. Turn 2, you can play a bounce land, add green and X, you clone Amulet, float a green, cast Grazer, play a bounce land to get to 4 mana. You cast Grazer or Explore or Azusa, cast Titan. It's like many turn 2 lines. It's a little bit best case scenario mentality, but this kind of stuff does happen for Amulet Titan, and it's good to have another turn 2 line.
Yeah, and also this isn't that terrible if you end up doing something like this on turn 3, or
exactly.
It's more consistency in a deck that everybody hates playing. And I've seen a number of Amulet people on Twitter talking about this, saying they think it's an auto 4 of in the deck, including, somewhat well-known Magic Online player Nicholas Bruno, also known as Punt Then Wine, one of the best Magic screen names. He said on Twitter the other day that he was sure that he was going straight to it as a 4 of in the deck.
Yeah. I mean, I've also heard people say there's like limited space in Titan for the lands, but no, it's there. It's an option. It's important to note that it also does like filter mana. So you can pay for like Pact of Negation or like random weird like Swan Song things with access to more blue mana than you might typically have. So we'll see. I think it's cool. I think the other potential uses of it are like even in Hammer to copy Hammer or Esper Sentinel. I've heard, Lantern aficionados say things like your mill rocks, your bridges, that kind of thing can be copied with Mycosynth Gardens. So I think there's a lot of potential uses here. There's like the overtly sort of powerful ones and then much more niche, but I think that this sees play because of the applications.
Yeah, I agree. One thing that's interesting, I'm looking at it now, it doesn't say on here that it remains a land.
No, it just becomes the artifact.
Or until end of turn, it just becomes the artifact. So I do think you have to keep in mind that you're going to lose a land when you do this. So if you're thinking about places to play this card, maybe that's why it makes more sense in something like Titan, where you're just going to get a ton of lands, versus something like Hammer, where you're running pretty mana light. And so sometimes it's hard for you to lose a land to do something like what you're talking about. So it's interesting. The timing is important here.
Yeah, especially like in like Saga decks where you're also potentially losing lands. Like maybe you're making some constructs on the way or getting a permanent back out of it. Like in this, you're going to lose some mana.
Yeah. Yeah, and worth noting, Titan plays Saga as well.
Yeah.
But they don't care. They just want to win on turn 2 or turn 3 anyway. So
yeah, that's the ideal.
All right. Were those all the cool lands? That's it?
Those are the cool lands that I've noticed so far. So we'll see if we've got more of that next week.
Okay.
What's after lands, Dave?
Everybody's favorite card to argue about. We need to talk about it next, Shane.
Yeah, because we're going to the 1-drops.
Yeah, we're going to 1-drops. We're going to organize it by casting cost as best we can here. So 1-drops. Shane, I love that you put in the notes here. Are we even a Magic podcast if we don't talk about this card? And that card is
talk about it.
Minor Misstep. How many tweets, how much digital ink was spilled over discussions in the last week about this 1 mana counterspell?
One mana counterspell. That sounds great, Dave.
Yeah, except it's counter target spell with mana value 1 or less.
Ooh,
for 1 mana.
Oh no. Oh no, my rhinos.
I mean, it's a clear callback to Mental Misstep, which is in New Phyrexia.
And that was just Phyrexian mana counter target spell with mana value 1?
Correct.
Okay.
A card that is patently bananas, and that I know one time I mentioned might be okay to unban on this podcast. I had been drinking. What can I say for myself? I don't think that's true. But what do you think about this card where you actually pay for it, though?
Okay, this card, fine, where you actually pay for it. So this is probably unplayable, right? I mean, like you can, so why is Spell Snare good, right? Like Spell Snare, I mean, why is Spell Snare maybe okay? It's like it gets you mana advantage and helps on the draw.
Yeah.
And like you could look at this spell and say, well, Shane, isn't this better on the play? You know what's potentially better on the play is like doing anything proactive most of the time.
Yeah.
Does the drawbacks for this are that you can't counter anything with mana value anything else than 1 or less, right? And it's like you can say the same thing about Spell Snare, of course, too, right? But like Spell Snare is like a cheeky one of sometimes.
It's coming up to 2 of in Murktide lately. I don't know if you looked at the mocks over the weekend, but there were multiple Murktide players with two Spell Snares main.
I mean, I imagine part of that, right, is just like, hey, like if I get someone with a Spell Snare, then I'm getting mana advantage out of it. And I know there's a lot of 2-mana spells that I care about tagging, especially things like Wrenn and 6, or maybe if they, for some brilliant reason, predicted that there would be 2 people on Domain Zoo. They must have listened to our podcast and chosen Domain Zoo to take to the mocks.
That was crazy, right? It is funny how many cards in Domain Zoo get countered by Spell Snare.
Yeah. But for me, I feel like you don't get a lot back out of this, besides saying, like, I paid 1 mana for your 1 mana spell as well. So I don't have to hold up as much mana. I maybe can, I mean, there's a lot of powerful 1 mana spells in Modern. There's like Unholy Heat and Thoughtseize and I don't know, all kinds of stuff, right? Give me 1 mana spells, Ragavans, yeah.
Dragon's Rage Channeler.
Yeah, but lots of other 1 mana spells deal with those already that don't have to be reactive.
Yes. However, this does deal with both Thoughtseize and Ragavan, and we haven't seen too many cards for 1 mana that deal with a creature spell and a non-creature spell, and that's the real point of this design, or the interesting thing to talk about here, at least.
Sure. What do you think about it?
I've gone back and forth a couple times. When I first read it, I was like, ooh, and then when I thought about it, I was like, this is one of those cards that just really illustrates. Probably the best summation I saw of this is someone who posted a tweet that had a picture of Peak, a picture of Gitaxian Probe, a picture of Mental Misstep, and a picture of Minor Misstep all together, and said, just posting these cards here together for no reason.
Yeah, because as we know, Peak is just basically unplayable.
And Peak is literally the same text as Gitaxian Probe. It just costs 1 blue, and nobody ever plays it. You're right. And then here we have the same thing, but for Mental Misstep, except for Mental Misstep doesn't counter 0 mana spells.
Yeah,
which
it's strictly worse, Dave.
Whatever,
get rid of it.
Whatever there. But like, I don't know. Like, I look at this card and say this is definitely completely unplayable? I don't. I think that there's some chance that this makes sense in a really teched out counter package of some kind. But I don't think that there's a place where this card is a 4 of at all. So it's definitely like in the same bucket for me as Ceremonious Rejection, which is a card that doesn't get played anymore. And then what's the new one that was getting played recently because it fought off Cascade and it fought off Creativity, both. It's a 1 blue that would Test of Talents if you had Delirium.
Oh, yeah, that gets rid of all the copies of that spell.
Yeah. And this card and Spell Snare, like, I think that this is a fine 1 mana counter spell to have around to potentially use in certain metagames. Maybe it's a 2 of someday. That's kind of how I feel about it. And then on another day, it won't be around anymore. But I don't think that this is like a new staple beyond being in a consideration set.
Okay.
I mean, do you think that's overreaching?
No, I think it's fine. Like, I think it, there's no reason to go to, die on the hill and just be like unplayable, but I would be surprised to see it have enough utility just simply because of the narrowness.
Yeah. It's definitely not a 4 of. We'll see where it goes from there. This card, though.
Yeah.
Did you have some feelings for Venerated Rotpriest? Or as I keep wanting to call it, Venerated Riot Priest?
Well, I think that that's actually a pretty good name for this card because it's a 1/2 Phyrexian Druid for a single green mana. It has Toxic 1, which again gives a poison counter, 1 poison counter every time this would deal combat damage. Shane, that sounds bad, but whenever a creature you control becomes the target of a spell, target opponent gets a poison counter. Whenever a creature you control becomes the target of a spell, target opponent gets a poison counter.
Becomes the target of a spell.
A spell, not your spells.
Yes.
A spell.
A spell.
Now we're talking.
Not opponent spells.
Any spell.
Yeah. Shane,
now
let me ask you a question.
We're talking here.
Let me ask you a question. Do you like spells?
On a scale from 1 to spell, I'm definitely spell.
Your spell? Perfect.
Yeah. That's a weird scale.
Yeah.
I mean, you're just like immediately, what are the cheapest ways for me to break this card? Whether it's breaking it or like using it in an unfair way, but that's not completely broken. Like, there's got to be janky combos that like die to strong breezes, but this card can go right in there.
You know there is one right away because the first thing that everybody looks at this with a card like this is always Ground Rift.
Ground Rift.
Ground Rift, which is a single mana storm spell that gives, what does it do? It says target creature can't block this turn. Is that what Ground Rift does?
Right. That sounds right.
It does not matter what this card does. So this card is a single mana red, and it says
target creature without flying because the ground is bumpy.
Rifting. Yeah, we're in Rift World when you play this card. Target creature without flying can't block this turn and has Storm. So people try this all the time with things like Nif Magus Elemental. They tried it a little bit when those Magecraft cards came out in Strixhaven. This is just the cheapest of the Storm cards, right?
Yeah, like Aspiring Spikes on like Boros, Ground Rift, combo decks with like, Ancestral Anger and Emerge Unscathed and whatnot, Mutagenic Growth.
Yeah. And trust me.
Some interesting things about this, though.
These are all cards that I like. These are cards that I would love to be in a deck together. Spencer from our Discord shared a Ground Rift Rotpriest list with me earlier today that was filled with like all the cheap spells. It's like Bauble and Mutagenic Growth and Ground Rift. It looks like prowess, kind of, honestly, when you start to look at these things together. But people really think that in this broken version, this Ground Rift version, that it's possible to kill very early with very low mana. Like we're talking God draw turn 2. And the thing that's crazy about Rotpriest versus other things like this is that you don't have to attack with it to do it. And so it makes it hard to interact with, right? Because
exactly,
if your spells are instant speed, which the ones in this particular Ground Rift combo are not instant speed, it means that if they kill it or put a removal spell on the stack, you can still react to it and do stuff to get more counters off.
Yeah.
Which in my mind brings me back to kind of where I think it's more possible that this card will see play.
I mean, it'll see play, but I think like a lot of shells like this, it could be surprisingly fragile. But what I like about this,
that's not a surprise, Shane. Surprisingly,
that's the idea.
Fragile. Wow, you're going to be the nice one on this spoiler episode?
I mean, maybe. So there's a couple of things I do like about Venerated Rotpriest, though. Okay, so you don't have to target it with a spell. That's an interesting wrinkle. You can kind of target anything. So you can do a combo thing where, let's say it's like, a Boros Ground Rift deck or like a Naya Ground Rift deck that's attempting to just beat down with damage, and you're applying pressure that way, and then also threatening with Infect at the same time. So you might be like, okay, well, you want to kill the creatures that are attacking you, and so you can't really attack my Venerated Rotpriest at the same time, potentially. But like if you're casting those spells on creatures, you're likely already kind of winning. Maybe, you know what I mean? But you don't have to attack, like you said, so you don't have to like send them to their impending doom. You can just like be casting spells on your creatures and then dealing passive damage with like weird toxic reach.
Yeah. Why aren't we just talking about putting this in Infect?
Well, I feel like that was the next step.
I feel like, but you're kind of like, what if there was a deck where what you did was attack with creatures that you put pump spells on at instant speed, but also, if you had to, you could target them at Rotpriest.
Oh man, you're right. Why not do the thing? Why not just do the thing already in fact? Where it's just like, we were talking about this in the Discord today, and I was kind of like, well, Infect's not that great and like blah, blah, blah. But it's also just like, so what does this add to Infect? It doesn't actually swing with Infect. What is it doing? And here's what it's doing. It's giving you Infect Lightning Bolts. That's
kind of what I
Infect
think.
Reach. Yeah.
They cost a lot. It's a lot of card disadvantage, let's say, to be able to have Infect Lightning Bolts. But,
Well, it's more like Infect, not even, what's a gut shot you pay mana for? What's a 1 mana burn spell?
Lava Dart. Needle drop.
You're lava darting them.
Yeah.
I think it can be part of the Infect strategy because, I sort of see, in a world where Infect does not die to Fury all the time, it's, you get enough in and you're like, crap, I'm having a really hard time attacking in here. And then you sort of hold a couple spells in hand, draw into a Venerated Rotpriest, play the Rotpriest. They target the Rotpriest with removal, and you have a couple instant speed spells in hand and finish them off.
Yeah, I think that's totally possible, reasonable, potentially a thing that could help, in fact, be a thing again. I mean, if you look at the traditional like blue-green Infect lists from way back in the day, I mean, nobody plays those ones at all anymore, but you could be going up to having 12 creatures plus Inkmoth Nexus in there with Infect, right? Which is not what you used to have. You used to only have 8. And then you're kind of doing your thing. And if you look at the deck that's kind of more likely for people to play these days, which is black-green, in fact, they have a card in there called Plague Stinger right now, which is a 1/1 flying Infect creature for 2 CMC. It's just a flying Infect 1/1 for 2 mana. I feel like if you were going to play black-green Infect right now, you would probably go for Rotpriest over this card anyway, although it does have evasion in the same way that, Blighted Agent has evasion. So I don't know. But it feels to me like there's something where this just gives an Infect strategy reach and something to do with pump spells. Especially if you get in a scenario, like you said, where you get a hit in and someone tries to kill your thing and then you Vines of Vastwood. So you get someone for like 5, let's say, right? And then it goes to their turn, and then they Fury you, and they clear your board, and then you drop Rotpriest and get a couple of spells off, and maybe you have the reach to make it happen.
Bob's your uncle.
Yep. Bob is your uncle.
My uncle's name is Chris, but what's our next single mana value spell, David?
This card, I don't know about this card. Gleeful Demolition for a single red. It's a sorcery. It says destroy target artifacts. And it says, if you control that artifact, create 3 1/1 red Phyrexian goblin creature tokens.
Oh, yeah. Very interesting. I mean, this is of course a new version of Kuldotha Rebirth. One of my favorite spells I've never cast in my life.
It was fun and limited, and I know that it's a staple of Pauper in different ways.
Yeah. It's a red sorcery. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice an artifact, create 3 1/1 red goblin creature tokens. So that is a cost sacrifice. This is a destroy target artifact. So you can do this in kind of interesting things that are different though. Like you can target indestructible artifact lands. You can target stuff like experimental synthesizer for value. I mean, there's a lot of talk about this, from the enthusiasts of like things like 8 whack, 8 Kuldotha effects. Really bad creativity tech. Who knows? Like
really bad creativity tech. Target your clue token.
I don't know. Like there's a lot of stuff to do with this, and like the fallback is a red sorcery shatter, 1 red mana sorcery shatter, because it's just target artifact. So you can just target your opponent's stuff for value if you really need to.
In the infrequent moment where they do that.
Yeah,
but we'll see. I mean, it is a combo, quote unquote, combo piece that has a fallback into just being interaction, sort of, which is cool. I mean, I think the place for this that it's most possibly to be used is probably 8 whack-esque kind of things, because now we have a world where we have 8 goblin bushwhackers that are reasonably costed, even for modern. With the original one, and then I forget the name of the second one that has the second spell you cast ability, and then you have 8 Kuldotha effects. So now we have this kind of rule of 8 deck going on, where what it is a hyper aggro creature swarm strategy that you can probably do some damage pretty fast. It may be a really good budget deck in modern.
Yeah, I mean, Rule of eight's important. That's kind of the thing here. If you're relying on a Clodotho effect, now you have a lot more to fall back on. There's like some value stuff like, Wishclaw Talisman.
Yeah.
You can activate it in response, I believe. And so
Yes.
like you can search up the card, get some tokens at the same time, and they don't get the Wishclaw.
That's right. And then what you do is you use Wishclaw to search up a diabolic intent, and then you sacrifice the token to diabolic intent to get another card. So it's just 8 tutors, 8 Kaldothas. Shane, that was a joke.
Perfect deck building.
Yeah.
Perfect deck building.
Beautiful.
All right.
I think
Dave, you added
cool.
this next one.
Yes, I did add this next one. I do think there's one more card that we should talk about right now. And I'm looking through the spoilers right now to see if there's even anything else since we made these notes. But Skrelv, can I just tell you how tired I am of these names?
You don't like Skrelv?
Not? I mean, Skrelv is a symbol of my discontent. Skrelv.
He's a Defector Mite, though, or they are.
Skrelv, Defector Mite, a single white for a 1/1, toxic 1. Skrelv, Defector Mite, can't block. It is a legendary artifact creature Phyrexian Mite. It fills up
one.
that type line so much. And here's what Skrelv does. It's a 1/1. It has toxic 1, like we said. But what it has is a white Phyrexian mana and tap to choose a color. Another target creature you control gains toxic 1 and hexproof from that color until end of turn. It can't be blocked by creatures of that color this turn. So it just has protection.
Yeah.
Even though it doesn't say protection.
Yeah. Why not say protection? I mean, maybe there's something.
It's so I can still cast spells on it that are of the color, I guess.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So white or Phyrexian, what do you want to do with this?
I mean, I think that it's worth noting. So Pioneer doesn't have access to a good Mother of Runes, Giver of Runes effect like this. And so I think that there's a chance that this can just be a good card that's around in Pioneer to do things in creature combos that want protection. Now, I don't know what that is, but it's just an interesting new tool for the format that actually is at a pretty reasonable mana cost in the sense that it costs 1 mana and it's free to use as long as you're willing to pay 2 life. So it feels like Pioneer level protection effect.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a human, which is like an issue for like white humans decks. But like you said, I mean, it doesn't have to go into humans. It could go like some Aura-Z deck back in the day, or I don't know what it's going to go into, but it's something that you said, like you said, it's something that we're kind of missing this effect a little bit.
You get me, Shane. Having a reusable effect like this in auras, though, would make some sense. I think there's some tools in this set. We'll talk about one a little bit later that makes Pioneer Hammer a more viable potential option. And so that's a deck that some people have messed around with a little bit. And this is a card that, if you want to protect your creature that you manage to sneak a hammer onto, this can help with that too. There's one more 1 mana card I'd like to talk about, Shane. It was just spoiled.
Okay.
This is a 1 mana artifact.
It
costs a single black. It is called Vat of Rebirth. And I'm not sure who spoiled this because it's not on the spoiler sites yet, but I think by the time this episode comes out, it will be. So we're going to talk about it. And it says, it's an artifact, and it says, whenever another artifact or creature you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put an oil counter on Vat of Rebirth.
Okay.
2 colorless, black, and tap. Remove 4 oil counters from Vat of Rebirth. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcery.
Okay.
Okay. What do you think about this when you look at it?
Oil counter, remove 4 oil counters, return target creature from graveyard to the battlefield. So what do you want to return here? Because, we know lots of ways that these types of decks have to put stuff into the graveyard, but what is worth 2 and a black and all the build up as your payoff?
So, couple of different questions, right? Like, depends on the format, I think. This is a single mana card. It's probably too slow for modern, but I do think that there's a chance that in a deck that's full of treasures and food tokens, that you could potentially bring back something giant, like using this to bring back your Troll King or whatever in a food deck, or having some kind of thing that you discard with Cookbook
Yeah.
to be able to bring back a giant reanimation token with this. Whenever another artifact or creature you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, this works with tokens. This works with treasure tokens. This works with creature tokens. This works with blood tokens. And here's the thing.
You could spin this thing up quickly. You could fill that vat.
Yes, you can fill the vat pretty quick. I mean, someone in our Slack today, what is this? 2018?
2 years ago?
Discord pointed out that you can use this. I'm looking at it. Oh, if you cat oven with this, you get 2 tokens immediately, 2 oil tokens on it immediately. Oil counters.
Yeah. I mean, cat oven runs really lean, so like, what's the big payoff? But I like the example that you gave of like even like a Asmo food deck. There's definitely a lot of stuff moving in and out of zones, and like you could definitely, like you said, have some larger payoffs as part of your whole discard strategy there.
Now, can I have you reread this card really quickly? Because there is a piece of text that I assumed was on this card that is not on this card.
You don't sacrifice Vat of Rebirth.
Correct. When you first read this, you assume that this card sacrifices when you activate the activated ability. You do not. So you can take 4 oil counters off this and then just start it over.
Yeah. I mean, not that I'm comparing the two, but that's kind of the same thing like Aetherworks Marvel would do, right? It's just like, hey, this thing just stays around. You just keep that Marvel going.
Yeah, this is all right, Shane said it, Vat of Rebirth, Aetherworks Marvel 2.0. It's got its own novel counter type on it as well.
Yep. Hey, we're there. We did it.
We did it. But I just think this card is interesting. Spencer from our chat posted a list where he was aiming to reanimate Ashen Rider in Pioneer with it, which is a powerful, stacks type card. You can use this in conjunction with Fable the Mirror Breaker to get a whole lot of the tokens. You can have a Goblin token. It makes treasure. You get the other creature. It's a lot. It's a lot going on here.
I mean, you're right. Yeah. I think that's not to be overlooked.
All right.
This is a grindy engine. Another grindy engine.
For 1 mana.
Yeah. And that's the last of our 1 mana cards for now. Not a ton of 1 mana value stuff to talk about in this, which is a little bit of a downer for now. We'll see if anything else comes out.
Shane, we talked about these 1 mana cards for like 30 minutes. So
I know. We're already running slow. Okay. we can speed through a few of these, I think, because we have Kemba, Kha Enduring, 1 and a white legendary creature cat cleric. It's a 2/2. Whenever Kemba or another cat ETBs under your control, attach up to 1 target equipment you control to that creature. And equipped creatures you control get +1/+1. And 3 white, create a 2/2 white cat creature token. So here's like an interesting sort of core outfitter variant. And unfortunately, it doesn't equip to like target creature you control, but only cats or itself.
It's not really a core I guess it's a combination of core outfitter and Silversteel Paladin, right? Silversteel Paladin is way better than this card. Like
what is
way
like
better.
Pure Steel or Silver Steel? Is there a Silver Steel?
Pure Steel Paladin.
Okay,
Paladin.
This feels like core outfitter where it ETBs and then sticks the hard to equip thing onto something.
Right.
Okay.
But you can do it over and over again. You just have to keep playing creatures.
That's
and
a good
Core
point.
Outfitter is a one-shot. This is not really a one-shot. And in fact, it even comes with an activated ability if you ever find yourself in that space where you can pay 3 white for a token that you can re-equip to the token. That's the joke, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool. I mean, this is not like a modern hammer card, but is this like our Pioneer hammer card?
I do think there's a chance that this could make Pioneer Hammer, which I said was already kind of a thing.
It's a bunch of cats.
Depending on how you look at it. Yes. There's a bunch of cats. Weirdly, there are a bunch of cats. Let's talk about the cats. Okay, so this is the second equipper that goes with Sigarda's Aid. It's not as good as Aid, but, for Pioneer, maybe it's okay. But the fact that it only attaches to cats, here are the cats. There are 2 1-mana cats that are interesting to me. One is called Dread Malkin.
I know this card. You know why?
Okay.
It was in my like 1-drop black deck that I would use for black quests on Arena.
Okay.
I love the Dread Malkin.
What's Dread Malkin do?
It's what? Is it like a 1/2 with Menace or something like that? Or
yeah, I think it's just a 1/1 even with Menace.
Okay.
Honestly.
Okay.
But here's the one that's more important, and that is Sacred Cat from Amonkhet, which is a 1/1 for 1 lifelink with Embalm for 1.
Oh yeah, you got to embalm it.
Yeah, you got to embalm it. And then there's Wily Bandar, which is a 1/1 for 1. And that one can get indestructible if you have enough mana when you play it, which seems like a pipe dream, but who knows? However,
so these are not great.
These are. I actually think that Sacred Cat is not too bad as far as this kind of thing goes. And then, of course, you would still play Ornithopter and those kind of things, potentially. Sure. But the notable 2 CMC one is Adorned Pouncer, which has double strike on a 1/1 for 2 mana, and then also has Embalm. Now, the Embalm cost is very expensive on Adorned Pouncer. It's like 5. But still.
Yeah, I mean, a double strike hammered up Adorned Pouncer. Let's do it.
It's just like hitting him with an Ink Moth Nexus, Shane.
Perfect. It's just exactly like it.
Cat Infect. Yeah, I don't know.
You get +1/+1 too, so it's even better than regular old hammer.
That's right. I mean, it's probably dumb, but it feels like surprisingly there's better cats available to try to mess with low on the mana curve than you would expect.
I mean, honestly, even if you're not doing a bunch of cat stuff, like I think just like Kemba coming down and equipping an equipment to it is decent. Do you know what I mean? Like, hey, like it's a card operator that only targets itself. It cheats a hammer onto it. There's other kind of cards that we've talked about doing some hammer cheaty stuff as well in previous sets. So, I mean, we keep getting slowly and surely towards a janky hammer deck in Pioneer.
Yeah. Hammer's worth the payoff. That's the main thing that we know. It's just a question of how do you make it happen.
All right. Another card that I don't think is really worth talking about. Ossification, a 1 and a white enchantment aura that enchants a basic land you control, and then it's basically chained to the rocks for any basic land, and it costs 1 generic mana more, so it's probably too much.
Yeah, I don't know about this card. Especially if you look at Modern. Leyline Binding is so much better in Modern.
Oh, I mean, not Modern, no, yeah.
And then if you look at Pioneer, it's like, I don't think that it's worth having this to it. If this had Flash, I could see this being like, maybe you would give it a try along with the Planeswalker stuff, but I feel like Leyline Binding is even better in Pioneer than this card is, so I don't know.
Yeah, it's a skip probably. I just wanted to point it out. It does exist.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right, the next card is one that caused some stir when it was spoiled, and that is Soulless Jailer. Mm-hmm. Soulless Jailer, an 0/4.
Roll-Juror.
Yeah, Roll-Juror. Artifact creature, Phyrexian Golem. At least it's not called like Kurjikish Soulless Jailer or something like that. It's a legend. Permanent cards in graveyards can't enter the battlefield. Players can't cast non-creature spells from graveyards or exiles. It's a familiar amount of text on here.
Yeah. It's an 0/4 artifact creature. I mean, it's just like a Grafdigger's Cage type thing. Other kind of anti-graveyard options that have like sort of static artifact abilities. It's interesting. I mean, having it on a creature is almost always worse than having it on an artifact. It's because it just can die to different types of removal.
Yeah, except for, the decks that are built to search things up at instant speed or, cheat things into play. So we're talking things like Court of Calling, or we're talking like, what's that one card that was in Brothers War randomly? The green card that lets you do survival of the fittest, basically. Fauna Shaman. Like, is it or did you do Fauna Shaman-y kind of stuff with it? Like, if you were searching up creatures in a deck that's toolboxy, this kind of thing can be good. And I don't think we have one that's quite like this available to us right now. And it's an 0/4, so it doesn't die to Lightning Bolt. It doesn't die to shock effects. It doesn't, removal's not easy, super easy against it.
I mean, the real issue here is that something like Yawgmoth, which is like our preeminent, tutor deck in Modern, I'd say, you don't want this card.
No, you don't want this card played against you, and you don't want to put it into play.
Yes. So it's an interesting option. It's an option that exists, and therefore it's cool. And we talked about it.
Yeah. Thanks, Shane. Thanks for adding it to the spoiler list for me.
No problem. Filigree Sylex, a 2-mana legendary artifact. Tap, put an oil counter on the Filigree Sylex. Tap, sacrifice the Filigree Sylex. You destroy each non-land permanent with mana value equal to the number of oil counters on the Filigree Sylex. Tap, remove 10 oil counters from all permanents you control, and sacrifice the Filigree Sylex. It deals 10 damage to any target. So this is just a strictly better Ratchet Bomb, right?
Yes, it's the same card.
I mean, it's legendary, but you're never having like a couple ratchet bombs on the battlefield, really.
Getting
So this
all
is
the
like
ratchet
marginally
bombs
useful.
out.
Marginally useful if you do happen to get it up to 10 oil counters and deal 10 damage. Like that can actually happen.
You're not getting it up to 10 counters, though.
Yeah. Oh, well, among permanents you control, which is itself.
Right, itself plus other permanents. So if you have that reanimation thing that we were talking about, for example, you know, and I think there's some other cards in here, like I said, or maybe we're not going to talk about them this week because they're late spoilers, but you know, there's like a 1/1 goblin that has trample or an 0/1 goblin for 1 mana that has trample that gets oil counters that gets bigger. And so I think I don't know how, like, the effects of these cards don't make any sense together, but there's a chance that there might be some oil cards that go together to make something like Filigree Sylex do its thing. Very low probability, though, I think. Ratchet Bomb is not like a great card, so...
No, it's not seen very often, but this is better than Ratchet Bomb. But, you know, does it matter? Maybe not.
Mostly not.
Okay. Is that all of our 2-drops so far, really? Not that many.
Yeah, I'm double-checking right now, and it's not a ton.
We start getting more interesting as we get up the mana curve, which is, you know, typical, especially for a standard power level set. You're going to have more power and more interesting effects isolated up on the curve. So let's get into our 3-drops. This is the Blade of Shared Souls we talked about earlier on. I mean, like I said, that's the one that kind of clones things. It's not like Glasspool Mimic sees a lot of play. That's a 3 mana value clone. That's also a land. I think that's probably better than Blade of Shared Souls. But, you know, this exists. It's a thing. You get a 2/2 red rebel out of it.
Yeah, unfortunately, the problem with these clone effects is that it's a copy of target creature you control instead of just a copy of target creature, so it can't be the best of what's on the battlefield.
Yeah.
So, I don't know about this one. I'm still hopeful for the mechanic, but I feel like they're holding a Mirran card in the back pocket somewhere. Let's see what it is.
So it's got to be. There's got to be one pretty good one, right? And I haven't seen one yet.
Let's talk about the other equipment before we go on.
Okay.
Sword.
There is a sword.
Sword of Forge and Frontier.
Is this the one we have so far? Do we have the other one yet? I feel like they're going to complete the cycle of 10 in this set.
Is there only one more left?
I believe there's only one more left because we have 5 original, then we had 3 allied ones in Modern Horizons 1 and 2, if you can remember those are real winners. Okay. And then we have this one. And so we have 1 left, 1 allied sword. So this one is Sword of Forge and Frontier, 3 mana, equipment, gives +2/+2, and has protection from red and green. But here's the stuff that we care about. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play those cards this turn. You may play an additional land this turn. Equip 2. So I think this one's pretty good. And I don't know how good. And here's why I think it's good. The best swords, the one that you see play, give you some kind of legitimate card advantage in the form of like card draw or permanent removal. And this one at least gets you that. It gets you card draw, and it has potential mana advantage, although that seems like a little bit more like kind of win more or like gravy on top. Like, play those cards this turn is a nice bit of text because you can play lands, of course.
Yeah, I actually think that the best swords are so let's just say which 2 are the best. There's really only
Fire and Ice,
2 that are
Feast and Famine.
Those are the 2 best ones, I think, too.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of a chance that Light and Shadow is on that list, but these 3 all tower above the other ones. Like, if I was going to force rank these, it would be like Fire and Ice, Feast and Famine, Light and Shadow, War and Peace, and then the rest of them, basically. And Body of Mine would be at the bottom, unless you're playing limited. But the thing that sort of Feast and Famine does is that, you know, when you hit with them, it lets you untap all lands you control, which is basically sort of like a strategy where you can play a more controlling-ish sword strategy where if you hit, you know you're going to get all your mana back. And this isn't as powerful as that, but it does let you play another land this turn, so it does give you extra mana to have available to do things when you use this card as your strategy. Now, Forge and Frontier doesn't really seem quite powerful enough for Modern to be a part of any of those packages, but there are no cards like this in Pioneer anywhere. So, I don't know, maybe there's a chance, but there's also nothing that searches up equipment in Pioneer either, really. So, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's an interesting card. Like you said, I don't think this is one of those things where it's like, yeah, I can't wait to slot this into my Stoneforge deck, but I do think that it's, maybe a tier 2 sword as opposed to straight garbage.
Yeah. Do you know what color pair is not completed yet?
Allied color pair.
So there are 9 swords.
Yes.
There's 9 already. So there's 5 opposing and 4 allied, counting this one.
I know we have blue white. That's in Modern Horizons.
Yeah.
Tell me, Dave.
Blue black.
Oh, Dimir sword.
Dimir sword is the one that's missing. The only one that's missing, which I was surprised by. But look, I'm looking at Scryfall right now.
Here's my guess for the Dimir sword, by the way. In this
coming
set,
out. Here's my guess. It's coming out 6 years from now. But go ahead.
Proliferate.
Yeah, I think it'll have proliferate on it too. It's a good call. Blue black is proliferate is a very blue black ability. Mm-hmm. No home for Sword of Fortune Frontier, but we acknowledge your existence, Sword.
Man, Dave, do you want to talk about some bad cards? Some
I want to talk about
cards?
some weird cards that you're interested in. Yeah.
Okay. Glissa Sunslayer, 1 black green. I mean, this card's not good. Phyrexian Zombie Elf 3/3 with First Strike and Death Touch. Whenever Glissa deals combat damage to a player, you get to choose one where you draw a card and lose a life. You destroy target enchantment or remove up to 3 counters from target permanent. No trample, no evasion. Pioneer Rock players, maybe you can keep dreaming. I don't know.
Yeah, I got nothing for this card. I don't know what this is. Drawing a card is nice, but it has to deal combat damage to a player, so it's kind of like just Ophidian, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Like maybe you live the dream where I'm keeping the board clear and attacking. It's like, yeah, Grimflayer wants to do that too, and it doesn't do a very good job of it either.
Yeah. This card is from another era of Magic, I think personally, which we don't get to live in anymore in our formats in particular. So,
yeah. All right, another bad creature spell, and then I'm going to hand some stuff over to you to talk about Malcator, Purity Overseer. 1 white blue legendary Phyrexian Elephant Wizard, my favorite. Elephant Wizard. So here's your 3 mana 1/1. But when it ETBs, you create a 3/3 colorless Phyrexian Golem artifact creature token. At the beginning of your end step, if 3 or more artifacts ETB'd under your control this turn, create a 3/3 colorless Phyrexian Golem artifact creature token. Like 1/1 stinks, right? But I mean, this is interesting. Like, I'm not really sure the payoff is worth anything here. Is the juice worth the squeeze? Like, I mean, there's a lot of ways to generate bodies more quickly, right? Where it's like, yeah, I got 3 artifacts that ETB'd, and I have, 6/6 worth of golems, but I also could have made maybe 4 1/1 artifacts off of my, that new Izzet Season Pyromancer thing.
Yeah. I don't know, man. This is a fun callback to the Splicer.
Yeah.
Cycle. Blade Splicer is the best one.
Those had First Strike. Those cool.
There was a whole cycle. There was one that gave him Trample. There was one that gave him, I don't know what the black one gave him, Menace maybe. These ones had First Strike. This is like a fun callback to that idea from the original Mirrodin block. But this card, the thing that's hard about this is that artifacts entering the battlefield under your control this turn is not easy to accomplish on your opponent's turn. So you can do it on your turn through some kind of loop and then do it on their turn. I don't know.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so on this one. All right, what's the next one here? You want me to read this one?
Please, I keep reading things. These are all my terrible picks.
All right, I'm gonna read a different card.
You're not gonna read about Miglaws? You don't want to say Miglaws?
I don't think I'm reading about Miglaws.
That's my favorite Beck album. My favorite opening track off of
The Logic of Your Miglaws. So what you want to do with Miglaws Mage Crusher is play it in your Maze's End deck, because when a maze is crushed, it's at the end, right? Did it?
Perfect. Love it.
Perfect. All right. Can we talk about Mirran Safehouse? Is this on your list? It is not. Mirran Safehouse. As long as Mirran Safehouse is on the battlefield, it has all activated abilities of all land cards in all graveyards.
Okay.
This is a cool card.
I skipped this one. I thought it seemed goofy. Tell me about this card.
I mean, I don't have a ton of great ideas of how to use it right away, but there are so many ways to get lands into your graveyard at this point. Yeah, I mean, it does cost 3. It's 3 to be able to basically have like a mana rock that does any color, which probably isn't worth it in Modern, and it's probably some kind of really specific use case, but I just imagine people doing wild things with this card for some reason. Maybe it's just in Legacy where Dark Depths is legal, that you can do some stuff with Mirran Safehouse and Dark Depths. Or Westvale Abbey, or I don't know.
I mean, there's probably something, right? I mean, you're probably right. But it's one of those things where it seems too expensive for what I'm doing with it. I mean, this definitely seems like EDH.
Yeah. I bet there's some EDH stuff going on here too. All right, that's Miglaws and Mirran Safehouse. We're not talking about either one of those. How about a card that actually I think does have some potential for Modern specifically?
Okay.
And that is Tyvar Jubilant Brawler.
Perfect. Yes, this is actually a card worth discussing.
Tyvar, one of the first Planeswalkers we're going to talk. This set has a ton of Planeswalkers in it. This is another, we have 10 Planeswalker sets.
Yeah, this is weird.
So Tyvar is legendary Planeswalker. This is the like elf lord from Kaldheim. You may activate abilities of creatures you control as though those creatures had haste. So Tyvar has a static ability, just like a War of the Spark style Planeswalker. And then it has a +1, untap up to 1 target creature, and a -2, mill 3 cards. Then you may return a creature card with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Its starting loyalty is 3.
Yeah. So this is a unique walker, right? Like it has very particular use cases, I think. And it has some interesting chops with stuff like Devoted Druid combo decks. I don't know if that makes it good. It doesn't really seem like it doesn't do a lot besides like enable these creature synergies, but maybe that's just enough to be playable, right? Where it's like the milling 3 cards, returning a creature card with MV 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. And then it has haste, so that's perfect. Where you're just like, hey, I get my Devoted Druid back out of the yard and immediately go off. But isn't there already like that black spell that gets creatures back out of the graveyards and gives them haste? Like Postmortem Lunge or something?
Yeah, the only thing with this is that you can try it more than once.
Good point.
If they don't kill your Tyvar. So, and it also doesn't exile or anything like that. So if you bring Devoted Druid back, like if you get in a situation where you play Tyvar and then play Devoted Druid and try to go off and they kill Devoted Druid, then you can just -2 Tyvar and try to bring it back right away.
Yeah.
So
good point.
I do think that there's something to it being a Planeswalker, a permanent that adds some extra value to that deck. I just don't know if you can put together a shell where it makes sense to run that as a 4 of, or if you really can only put this in as like a bonus friend. You know, it's interesting that it does let you search, kind of like quasi search by doing -2. You get to mill the top 3 and see if you get lucky. So
yeah, and the plus is not bad. There's plenty of creatures that can make a bundle of mana, and you plus up Tyvar, you untap that creature. Like, I mean, this does not go into that shell, but we were just talking about that newer addition to like Lotus Field, where, you know, if you exert it, then it, you know, untaps 2 lands, and then you could, you know, use. I mean, you're not going to use it in that deck, like I said, but that's the kind of stuff that you can see happening where it's like my tap ability does something that is synergistic with the rest of my strategy, and then Tyvar untaps it, lets me reuse it, whether it's make like a bundle of mana off of like one of your weird like mana elf lords that like makes like 6 to 8 mana because it counts all your creatures, and you get to do it again, and then cast a bunch of stuff, empty your hand, cast some kind of giant Chord of Calling. You know, if you're doing something like that to go get your the Crater Hoof Behemoth or something like that, you know, there's options here.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems pretty good.
Yeah,
this one
cool.
I feel like is definitely going to get some play.
Yeah, it'll definitely see some kind of play in I think a variety of formats. So I'm all for it.
How about this next one? Are you all for this one? I'm going to make you say this name.
No. Unctus.
Okay. Can we talk about that? This is an actual, like, this is so close to a real word.
Yeah, it's
what are we doing?
unctuous without the second, without the O.
Unctus.
It's
like someone
Dave. That's what I always call, you know, tell my kids to call you.
It's like someone misread a crossword puzzle clue and was like, oh, it's only 6 letters and the word is unctuous. So I'm just going to fit it in there. It's Unctus.
This is my nightmare Scrabble rack.
Yeah.
So what Unctus does is it's a 2/4 legendary Phyrexian Veldalkin. Other blue creatures you control have, whenever this creature becomes tapped, draw a card, then discard a card. Other artifact creatures you control get +1/+1. And then blue or Phyrexian mana until end of turn, target creature you control becomes a blue artifact in addition to its other colors and types, activate only as a sorcery. I don't know, this is like an interesting looter effect, right? But like, so what?
Yeah. I mean, this is a callback to a card called Grand Architect that was in Scars of Mirrodin that people love to try to build around as part of different artifact creature packages. Short way of saying, I don't know what this card is. What is this card? Why am I making things into artifacts?
I don't know.
I
think what the main thing here is that you can potentially just draw cards and discard cards. I'm drawing cards, Dave.
I'm drawing cards. It must be good. I'm going to attack and all of my things are looters. Like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know about this card.
I don't know, man. It's
Fun
probably not
callback. Guess what happened to the Grand Architect? He turned into the Grand Metatect. Whoops. Can we talk about another one where it wasn't quite on the spoilers before we got a hold of it today, but it's a 3-drop?
Yeah, what is it?
This is a card that I alluded to earlier that you left off the list because I think it's more powerful than any of the cards that we've talked about so far today.
And it is?
That is Ichormoon. No, it's Ichormoon Gauntlet.
All right. Oh, that one, yes.
Ichormoon Gauntlet. Ichormoon Gauntlet, I don't have the source for this, is the artifact I mentioned. It is 2 colorless and a blue. For an artifact, it's a mythic rare. And it says, here's what it says. This is weird.
Like you're just laughing already.
Yeah. Planeswalkers you control have 0 proliferate and -12 take an extra turn after this one. And then it has, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, choose a counter on target permanent, put an additional counter of that kind on that permanent.
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of interesting text.
This is the first time we've ever seen something that adds Planeswalker abilities to Planeswalkers, right? I don't think I've ever seen that before.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't believe I've seen that particular like type line where it's like even has like the little outline of like the box that would be on the Planeswalker.
Right.
Which is really funny. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, we know how much we like casting non-creature spells. Choose a counter, put additional counter of that kind on that permanent. So yeah, I mean it works in a number of strategies. It's funny that like this is almost fine without the Planeswalker part, but like the Planeswalker, I mean it's not fine without it. I would not play this card. I can see it being played in EDH, of course, where you're going to want to do stuff like this, but it's something. The -12 take an extra turn after this one is really the thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a combination of the two. Like, I think it's definitely, there was a time where kind of Super Frenzy style decks were popular, and if you can play cheap Planeswalkers, especially ones that cost, say, 2 mana, 3 mana, get a board that has a bunch of stuff going on, and then add this to the mix. Like, if you can have 3 Planeswalkers in play and then play Ichormoon Gauntlet and then proliferate and activate somebody's ability, take an extra turn, go again. Like, it feels like there's just a lot going on there as far as a payoff to just having a deck that's just a ton of Planeswalkers here.
Yeah. I mean, it's a thing. I think that
Shane,
this will...
If I could design a deck that you would never play, this would be high on my list. If it was let's play Renin 6... and Narset Parter Avails, and Teferi Time Raveler, and I don't know, Gideon, the 3-mana Gideon that nobody plays anymore, like just all cheap Planeswalkers.
I mean, Dave, I'm a huge Super Friends player back in the day.
You love it.
So
you love it.
I mean, I think it's a cool spell, cool artifact.
All right. Maybe that's all it is, but we'll see.
All right. Let's talk about an actual Planeswalker, though. Because there's a bunch of Planeswalkers in this set, and I think there's a couple cool ones coming up in our 4-drop section. We've got Jace the Perfected Mind, 2, and then blue or Phyrexian mana, and then blue. Loyalty 5, but completed walkers. If you pay for the blue with Phyrexian mana, your 2 life, it only has 3 loyalty counters. So if you cast it for 4 mana, it's 5. If you cast it for 3 mana and 2 life, it's loyalty 3. Its abilities read +1 until your next turn. Up to 1 target creature gets -3, -0. -2, target player mills 3 cards. Then if a graveyard has 20 or more cards in it, you draw 3 cards. Otherwise, you draw a card. -X, target player mills 3 times X cards. So completed Jace, 3-ish or 4 mana, mills cards, probably not horrible. Like, the spell that, I forget the name of it, it's in mill, and if the graveyard has 20 or more cards in it, you draw 3 cards, is very underrated.
Visions of Beyond.
That is the card you don't want to see your mill opponent cast, because then you're just like, well, poop. They just drew into a win con or 2, right?
Yeah, but that's literal ancestral recall. When Visions of Beyond, when you have it triggered.
I mean, this is potential ancestral recall on a -2. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, that's a thing. This is a good mill walker, I think. This is strictly a mill walker. The -2 is like synergistic with the mill strategy, provides you that card draw to keep it going. If you just want to finish off your opponent or work towards that strategy, you can bring Jace down for 4, like -4 it, and get 12 cards out of their library and do other things with it. So I think it's totally fine for what it is. I think it's going to have a home somewhere. I don't know if it goes into straight into modern mill, because they probably already have a density of cards that they can win with, and this doesn't really win you the game as opposed to your mill spells. Sort of like gravy on top.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. The +1 is the thing that seems like the biggest bummer to me. Like, that ability is pretty underrated. -3, -0 until the next turn.
Good protection.
But I still am kind of like, I don't know about this, everybody. Let's talk about a Planeswalker that I'm actually excited about.
Oh, okay, cool.
Nahiri the Unforgiving.
Oh, man, this card's good.
The end of Nahiri.
She got blade hands.
Yeah, she's got blade. More people with blade hands. Completed. Nahiri costs a generic, a red or white Phyrexian mana, and a white. So she can cost 3 if you want with completed. And then her starting loyalty is 5, unless you use Phyrexian mana, then it's 3. And then she has +1 until your next turn, up to 1 target creature attacks a player each combat if able.
Yeah.
Then she has another +1, which is Rummage. It's discard a card, then draw a card. Then she has a 0.
Yes, the 0.
And the 0 is exile target creature or equipment card with mana value less than Nahiri's loyalty from your graveyard. Create a token that's a copy of it. That token gains haste. Exile it at the beginning of the next end step.
Sure says 0.
Sure says 0. This card just seems really good to me. I don't know, but it seems really good to me.
I feel like people aren't talking about this enough, but I also understand its limitations, right? Where it's like, when I first read it, I was like, holy crap, why is no one talking about this card for real? Then I was like, okay, wait, if you cast it for 3 mana, then it only has 3 loyalty, and the 0 is mana value less than Nahiri's loyalty, and that's kind of an issue. But
it's not less than or equal to.
No, it is less than.
Good point.
So that's something, right? But I can see this being more of a grindy card anyway. So I'm just going to assume that you're going to bring her with 5 loyalty most of the time. So I can see these applications of Stoneforge Mystic, or a Seasoned Pyromancer, or Grief, and Fury, and Solitude. Some kind of Mardu scam type thing. The real issue, of course, is Fury and Solitude cost 5 mana when you cast them for real. But you can very easily plus this for a variety of things. Its protection. The target creature cannot attack Nahiri, has to attack a player. If you're empty-handed, she just draws you a card. It does not say if you discard a card, draw a card. It's just discard a card, then draw a card.
Oh, yeah. That would say if you do, draw a card.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't say that. You're right.
So it's strictly just card draw if you're top decking and living in that world. So it's these are all interesting things, but just being able to get a target creature or equipment card with haste, you can abuse ETBs, you can get back powerful things that can attack in. Of course, they do get exiled, so you exile the target creature, and so you can't just sort of endlessly rebuy Furies or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, when I look at this, I just want to 0 Stoneforge Mystic, bring Stoneforge Mystic back, activate it, and get Cauldron Complete out of my library.
I am fine with that, yes.
Or I want to get a Pure Steel Paladin, whatever that card's called, back when I have Metalcraft and use that to equip my hammer to something when I've run out of hammer equipping effects, or get my hammer back when I have equipping effects and I don't have other stuff. I don't know if there's really space in Hammer Time in Modern for a Planeswalker, but there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, I mean, so in Pioneer especially, like a lot of the hammer shells we've been talking about, continuing on this hammer train, are in Boros colors, of course, because they're so equipment focused. So this is another thing that could sort of like be in that larger shell where it's like, maybe I'm doing some kind of like milling, or things are getting destroyed and I want to buy them back to like get my Kemba back or something like that, or get a piece of equipment that I find valuable, or there's all kind of things that I think could be beneficial out of this. And just the fact that it has a 0 instead of a minus. Like typically these are minus X effects, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So this is pretty bonkers.
Every time this effect has been on Liliana the Veil, it's been minus X equal to the mana value. Mm-hmm. And here it is on a 3-mana walker where it doesn't even die. You can try again if you have another target in your graveyard. Like, I don't know. I think this card's really good.
I mean, of course, we keep talking about like all these potential applications, but I do think that this is doing enough. It's doing enough novel things. It's cheap enough. It has a high enough loyalty. It protects itself. It draws you cards. I think there's enough here where there's a lot of options.
Yeah, totally agree.
Sweet.
All right, let's talk about not a Planeswalker.
Okay.
Mondrak, Glory Dominus.
All right.
This is the one that really made me want to just quit Magic.
Mondrak?
Where I was like, I'm good with the names, you guys. Like, can we not? Glory Dominus.
What does Mondrak do?
Mondrak, legendary creature. It's a 2 colorless, white, Phyrexian horror for a 4/4. If one or more tokens would be created under your control, twice that many of those tokens are created instead. Then it's 1 white Phyrexian. So you can pay a generic mana and 4 life if you want to. Sacrifice 2 other artifacts and or creatures. Put an indestructible counter on Mondrak Glory Dominus.
Sweet. What's an indestructible counter? That just means it's indestructible
like
after
Ikoria. That? Yeah, it just has it forever after that.
Oh, wow. I mean, so besides being like the $60 commander card, does this have like 60 card constructed chops? Like, I feel like it could do some cool stuff.
I don't know. What am I doing with this card? What am I doing with this card? I mean, I think that this one and the red one, there's a red one that does like the Torbrand effect, basically, like it doubles damage from non-creature sources, are good cards. Like, this is a good card on rates. You can make tokens. You can make a bunch of extra tokens.
And then what?
Yeah, and then what? I don't know for sure.
My issue with these kind of things is that you cast them on 4 if you're lucky, right? And then you have to keep doing what your deck is designed to do. But like at that point, it's like, well, have I just been holding like my raise the alarms or something like that? Do you know what I mean? Like, or is it a matter of like
4 tokens instead, or 3 tokens instead of 4?
I mean, that's a pretty weak example, of course, right? But it's like, well, maybe, or maybe it's like, hey, this goes into some sort of like token creature production trigger kind of engine where it's like, I when I play this, then all of a sudden I'm just going ham. But it's like, that sort of seems like a little bit of a win more to me. Like, this is the kind of stuff where it's like, I just assume that these are for like long commander games. People love creating token strategies in those, and this is just gonna go right into those decks.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly that kind of thing. Doubling season, like you said, it's a huge effect there. I also think the red one, which is not on Scryfall right now, is good too, like I said. So I think there's a chance that those mythics could be good. The blue one, we'll talk about maybe some of these next week, but
all right.
Yeah.
Okay, some other stuff.
Shane, I have another card that we need to talk about before we get to these other ones.
What is it?
It is called, here's the casting cost of this card. It is 3 generic red.
Oh my.
It's a 4/4 flyer.
Okay.
It is called Capricious Hellraiser.
Oh no, not this.
Not this?
Okay, why do you like Capricious Hellraiser?
And it says this spell costs 3 generic less to cast if you have 9 or more cards in your graveyard. It has flying, like I said. And then it says when Capricious Hellraiser enters the battlefield, exile 3 cards at random from your graveyard. Choose a non-creature, non-land card from them and copy it. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost.
Random.
You don't like dragons, bro?
9 or more cards in your graveyard, 4/4 flyer, exile 3 random cards from your graveyard. Oh my goodness. I mean, this probably has like some kind of weird like dragon potential, like, you know, a dragon storm type stuff. I don't know. Like this, that's like one of those decks that always was doing stuff against me in historic, and I was like, how? Why?
Why would you do this? Isn't this a pretty good backup
For
to Phoenix?
Okay. Oh, this, I was looking at the set and not looking closely enough because I was looking for, as we are wont to do, looking for either cheap spells or spells with mana reduction on them. And here's our mana reduction spell that I kind of overlooked. So yeah, if you have 9 or more cards in your graveyard, you get a 3 red 4/4 flyer, and then you get some kind of interesting potential value out of the pay it without its mana cost.
Right.
Sure. Cool. Love it.
What about a Phoenix-less Phoenix deck that is sometimes known as Is It Drakes?
Okay.
Where you're just really playing Crackling Drake along with this so that the exiling cards out of your graveyard's not really a downside.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it makes those big. Then this is also there to be kind of big and cheap sometimes. I don't know. This is just a card that, of course, makes me stop and go, I want to put this in a deck with Consider and Opt right now. And you do too, Shane, because you love Consider and Opt.
And Thought Scour.
And Pieces of the Puzzle. It's the other one.
I own Pieces of the Puzzle at this point in my life. So
I mean, that is a common, so I'm glad you have some.
I don't open a lot of packs, Dave. I don't have a lot of comments unless they're in constructed decks that I play.
Fair. I don't know. This card seemed like this is the card that we put in the deck for Is It Mages to rub their hands over and go, ooh, can I cast this for red? Red is still pretty costly for this card. It's still just a 4/4 flyer that casts Lightning Bolt, but maybe that's pretty cool.
Aspiring Spike card. Brewer card.
We should be so lucky.
So Dave, what do you think about winding down this week with one last card? And then we can pick anything we missed from this list and then talk about it next week.
Okay.
All right.
What is it?
And Tyvar's Stand. And this for our episode, Tyvar's Last Stand. X green, instant. Target creature you control gets +X/+X and gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Single green mana, hexproof, indestructible, but scales for damage potential. I'm not sure where this has a home, but I can see that potential. Like the issue here is like the mana inefficiency for the damage, right? It means like unless your deck can make a lot of mana, like let's say like mono green devotion or something like that, like this doesn't seem like a legitimate include, right? Where it's like, oh, is this go into like, let's just go back to like something like Infect, right? Where it's like, okay, hexproof, indestructible, green spell, interesting. But yeah, like I'm gonna have like 3 mana at most, like 3 or 4 mana, and what I'm just like pumping my creature +3/+3. It's like for 4 mana.
I mean, I love this secret mode of a single green for this to give hexproof and indestructible.
Yeah, it's like a Tamio's something or other is like the green mana. Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, so that's cool. I mean, I guess, yeah, in a deck like mono, I don't know about mono green devotion, but
no.
I do think that something like this could end up in an all-in strategy like Infect, where it's just like, oh, I have a couple of protection spells. I have space for a couple of protection spells that don't pump. Here's one now that does pump, and I'm just going to include it in my deck so that I have it, and then late game occasionally I'll get 3 extra damage off of it.
Yeah.
And mostly I won't.
Yeah. I mean, it's a card. I know that I saw Todd mention it. I don't know if he was just thinking standard or pioneer or even into modern, but you know, he was amped about it, and I thought it was worth mentioning just in the type of decks that we've been talking about this episode, where it's just like, hey, this is cheap, it's green, it gives my stuff indestructible, it helps pump things. Like maybe this does have a home because it targets your creatures, it keeps them alive. Why not?
Yep, totally agree. Why not? This is definitely a reasonable card to keep on your mind when you're building decks like that.
Yeah. That's not a bad first week. I mean, it seems like a slightly powered down set. There's nothing that's like, I mean, there's a few things that I think are like pretty cool, but nothing's like blowing my mind.
I can't figure out how many cards are released out of this set for what it's worth. So
I know.
If I had a better, like, I wonder how much is left to see even.
It's been a messed up spoiler season. I apologize again to all those folks who maybe had their spoilers spoiled. So hopefully this doesn't happen again. But, for now, we'll just have to roll with the punches and keep talking about these cards. But for now, that wraps up this week's show. If you haven't, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. You get the latest episodes as soon as they come out. If you use Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please feel free to leave us a rating or a review if you can. If you want to reach out to us, you can do so on Twitter or at The Dive Down, all one word. You can email us, thedivedown@gmail.com. If you want to support the show, of course, you can go to patreon.com/thedivedown to keep us going, get some swag for yourself, and check out the store over at thedivedown.com/store. Of course, manatraders.com helps keep us going. You can sign up for Mana Traders using promo code THEDiveDown10, all one word, for 10% off your first 2 months of renting Magic Online cards. You can, of course, also get some amazing shaving soaps, body soaps, fragrances, and more at Barrister & Mann. Use code THEDiveDown2023 for 15% off your first order. Save money on paper cards over at Nerd Rage Gaming using code DIVE8 for 8% off your order. Thanks to Nowhere and Spaceblood for letting us use their music. And until next week, enjoy something unctuous.